what we'll take a look at today is some of the new features within Inventor 2023 and Vault 2023. Before we get too far into it, I do want to share a little bit about myself. So my name's Caleb Funk, and I started working with CAD tools. I was going down memory lane today. In 1995 is when I really started working with AutoCAD Release 14 is what I had in college. And then 6 years later, is my official anniversary date with IMAGINiT. So it'll be 21 years, actually next month. So I'll be with IMAGINiT for 21 years. And over that whole time, I've really specialized in Inventor, the data management tools. I've worked with AutoCAD Electrical, I've worked with AutoCAD Mechanical, a lot of different things, served in a lot of different roles as I've worked through that. But yeah, I've been working with these tools for a long time. So I suddenly started thinking, I tried to remind myself of what some of the older versions of Inventor looked like. So for example, I went back and I was able to find this. This is the 2012. This is when they came on those awesome flash drives. And if you had the right software, you could wipe the flash drive and have yourself a very nice 64 gig Autodesk flash drive. Here's what I would say. If anybody out there has an older box shot, whether it's the actual box you still have or whatever of Inventor, I would love to see it. I don't know why. I was really looking for Inventor 5.3, could not find it anywhere. So just, yeah, email me. I'd love to see old Inventor stuff. That fascinates me. Speaking of old Inventor stuff, the other thing that's interesting is we're looking at Inventor 2023 today is what we're going to be taking a look at, but it really, they did it for a while where there was like Inventor 1, 2, 3, Inventor 5.3, right? There were these releases all the time. So just as a fun fact for the day, this is the 27th release of Inventor since it initially came out. So it's been quite a few years since it came out, but it's really the 27th release. Partially because they were releasing them every 6 months for a little while. So hey, if you've been with it that long, yeah, well done. Like I said, 21 years, I think I've worked with nearly all of them during that time. So that's a little bit about me. Talk a little bit about IMAGINiT. If you're not familiar with IMAGINiT as a company, we are an Autodesk Platinum VAR. We talk about, I've been here 21 years. The company, we've got 40 plus years of experience, 35,000 customers, large service partner. All of these different pieces go together. Here's, for me, it stands out that it's been fun working with all of these people through all these years to see the growth in the company and to see the strength that we have. It mentions there the largest team of technical experts. Yep, it's always amazing to me the depth that we have throughout our company and the things that we can offer. And what we really try to do is take a look at the areas that people are struggling with, whatever it would be, whether it's training, when we're looking at people, maybe you're not using the right tool with technology, or maybe you're not using it the right way when you're looking at processes. So that's really what we want to do, is help engineering-driven companies figure those things out and then be able to leverage whatever it is within there, improving knowledge, improving processes, changing technology. And we do that through a whole variety of different things, mainly through consulting and professional solutions, where we can come in, and it could be something as simple as a Vault implementation, right? We want to put software in place. It could be software development, it could be CAD management. Lately, we've been doing some managing vaults as well for people and handling some things like that. So it's a variety of different areas that we can support you in. So just a real quick little bit about IMAGINiT, a little bit about me. And in the idea of supporting, IMAGINiT, supporting you and working as a consultant, we'll start going to take a look at what's new within Inventor. And here's what I would say. When we start to look at this, if you were to look at any release of software, you will see a huge list of new features. And this is what we'll see this every single time. We'll see it with AutoCAD. We'll see it with these different ones as we go through. And if you were to look at Autodesk's homepage, these are some of the things I kind of pulled off of here. They'll say, these are the big highlights. These are some of these areas that we have in here and all these different things you can do. And throughout the years, while there's new things, a lot of times they don't dramatically change the way you work. An example has been, we've seen the interface change through the years, or maybe the text box, they adjust, something slightly been adjusted as we've gone through. I'm not going to go down a list bit by bit on every single one of these different areas. What I'm going to talk about is the things that stand out to me, that I have seen customers request, that I am pretty sure would be beneficial to customers. And those are the things I want to kind of look through so that we've got some actual useful items coming out of this. And they're there. There's some actually really useful things that I like quite a bit as part of this. So I'll hit just a couple of things, just some general announcements. The home screen's updated a little bit. This is one of those that's like, yep, it's definitely changed. I don't know that it's better or worse or anything else. You can, one thing that I thought was a little strange right away was where the projects were. So I just want to point that out. If you fire this up, it doesn't make immediate sense, you know, like, well, shoot, where'd all my projects go? So I'm just going to pop up my Inventor down here, my Inventor, there we go. And we'll get back to this home screen. If I take a look, this is my project list that I have right here. And I can pull it from the list, assuming it's an existing project I have open. If I have to go browse for one, right, I can go ahead and go to settings and it pulls up the old projects dialog box. So that was kind of my first thing. I'm like, I want to open up this new project. Where'd my information go? So this will give you your existing projects list, and then you have to go to the settings option there to get the other projects as they come in. So nothing crazy. It's just kind of be aware of it, I guess, as you go through there and take a look at it. And you can display these in thumbnail. You know, it's not a tremendous change from what you've seen in the past, but it definitely has changed a little bit from what we've worked with before. But that was one thing I wanted to point out, you know, right away. I'm like, oh, nope, got to know where that is. So the home tab's been updated. We can see some things there. This one I will file under, well, it's about time. So they changed the navigation enhancement. And now if you hold Shift and click and hold the middle mouse button, you will have rotate. Okay, we used to have other ways to access this. It could go off there's some different things off the right click. This is actually really useful. I got used to it incredibly quickly. And there's other software I've used that has similar ideas. And you've probably heard of that or used it as well. And really the idea is when you got a 3-button mouse, you click and hold Shift. If the full model is in view, the pivot point is the geometry center. So if we're actually looking right in the middle, you can see where that model is, it'll use the geometry center. If it's partially within the view, it's the nearest edge, face, or vertex of the nearest component. Now, I would love to know what algorithm they're using to say nearest. You know, is it depth? You know, how does that work? I don't know. It seems to work just fine, though. I don't question it. And if the model is outside of the view, which I'm not sure why we would want to, but basically imagine you're zoomed in very tight on a certain point, it'll use the center. The pivot point is the cursor location. This is all very intuitive, and I'll show it. I'll play with it here in a minute. You won't be able to see it because it's, you know, I'm clicking and holding my mouse, but the idea is those tools that has been added. Again, just hold Shift. You can move it around. Incredibly useful and very automatic for me. So that's a kind of a general enhancement. This one is interesting too. It's the idea of iLogic, and iLogic has been a big push. We've had a lot of clients both requesting it, working on it internally. It's based off Visual Basic, and it's a way that we can add intelligence into our models. We can take those models that we have and we can add intelligence. I always say iLogic comes in if we have the word if this happens, if that happens. So we could build up these amazing iLogic tools, but one thing you couldn't do to this point is say, ooh, that iLogic tool is great. I want to add that to my ribbon, so I have a button to hit. You could sort of do it. You could kind of do it through macros. You could work through it like that. The thing that I would point out here is you can now add external rules and global forms to the ribbon directly. It's a really straightforward set up to get through and do that. So if you have a global form that you want to just have a button that you can pop up, activate, and fill out, absolutely. There's a straightforward path to that. And I'll point that out here in just a second. The other one kind of along those lines is if you have multi-value parameters, instead of being in alphabetical order, you can do a custom order where you sort them. So you can put a specific one at the top of that order and you don't have to dig through. If you ever worked with that, you'll have some sense of that. If you've never worked with it, then it's all good. Then it's not something you have to worry about. I do want to pop up my Inventor. That's my Vault. I'll save that for later. But I'm going to pop up my Inventor and just take a look at a couple of quick things here. I just want to talk about that iLogic rule and point out where that's at and kind of how we can do that. So here's this little component that I have. This is all good. And this is what I'm talking about. If I hold Shift, so wish you could see me holding Shift, but if I hold it, it rotates right there, right? That's just the middle mouse wheel. And it allows you, this is all, I said if it's way inside the view, it grabs the nearest one. If it's outside of the view, it grabs the cursor point. Honestly, it's so intuitive that that's where I want to be, right? I'm not thinking about it a whole lot. So I kind of like that they added that in there, and I like how intuitive it is as part of that. I mentioned iLogic, and I'm going to create a global form here. So here's my form editor and all this good stuff, and I'm creating a form. And then all I want to have on this particular form is maybe some of my properties. I'm just going to fill out part number, stock number, and description every single time, right? Simple enough. Fill out properties. So this is now a global form that I have created and saved. And that's one of the keys. It can't just be a local one. It does have to be a global one. But now I can come along and I can customize how I want this to appear. So I can, it knows what tab I'm going to add this information to. It's my, my telling me the view panel. I can go see that here. And if you'll notice, iLogic Forms is right there. I can just drag and drop that. Excuse me, no, I just need to add it here. But I can add that over there. And I can determine whether I want to see it as a large icon, as a small icon, where do I want that to be? And I can determine which tab I want that to go to. And we'll say part 3D model. We'll add it to that one. So what happens now, and this is where I had it set up originally, that user command gets added over here. So now when I click on it, it brings up my properties box. It's very easy to add. I like how they did that. Before they just had this one called macros. I could go work off a specific macro. Now I can add an iLogic rule, I can add an iLogic form and trigger it right from the command line, not the command line. Oh my goodness, it's AutoCAD, going way back. Trigger it right from the ribbon as I work through there. So love it. I think that was a simple addition, and I think it was a very valuable one. A couple other basic things that they've added to this, the idea of ray tracing, which we've had for a while. It can now use your CPU, or if you have a GPU, if you got a graphics processing unit on there, and it can use that GPU to do the ray tracing. So that should be, it's going to be improved overall in terms of quality, and it should be pretty fast as we're going through that. Right now, this is only within the Inventor environment. It is not available in Inventor Studio. It's still using, Inventor Studio is still using the old renderer, but my guess is that we'll see that in the future. It only makes sense if they've got it in one, they'll expand it out and we can see it in both places later on. Part modeling enhancements. I'm always interested in part modeling enhancements. We do have a new feature, and this always fascinates me. I always enjoyed it when new features came out. We haven't seen a whole lot of them, but this is just what's called a mark feature. And it's kind of like the split command is what it kind of reminded me of, except where we used to split faces, except it works with text. It'll work with geometry. The idea is if as maybe we're working with a laser and we just need to etch a line onto something, or maybe it is engraving, or we need to mark something in particular. This is a feature that can do that. I'll show it here in just a minute. It's super simple, easy to do. You can use sketch or text geometry to add a mark. So this can be, when it goes out to a flat pattern, it's going to go along with it. It actually ends up being on a specific layer called, I believe it's just the mark layer is what it gets exported to when it goes out. So it's not a visible line, it's a mark line. So when we're feeding that into a laser, if we're going to do specific cutting or engraving or something like that, that shows up pretty easily in there for that. Well, we just jump over here, and I'm going to grab just this piece and open it up, and I'm going to mark on it. So I'll start out, throw on my sketch, and I'll do just a couple circles here. So I've got the holes that are in there, and then I'm just placing in some circles. And over here, if I take a look at my 3D model stuff, I've got all the standard tools, split, direct editing, and I've got mark. And this is such a simple tool. I just select the items that I want and say okay, and it marks them onto that face. So I could accomplish this with the old split tool that I have. This is just a much simpler, quicker, cleaner way of doing it. What I couldn't do with the split tool was geometry. I couldn't use, text. I couldn't use text to mark on a surface, and now we can as part of that. So it's just found over there. It's one of our modified tools, and it'll add it based off of sketch geometry or text. So nice addition, and particularly when it comes to laser engraving and working with that. Oops. Part modeling. When we're talking about part modeling, the other piece that we have is we have some things new with sketching. We can include standard eye properties in text. We were able to include and use text parameters, such as I could have a specific parameter, but if I wanted to have something etched on there that was the part number, for example, I just want the part number, and if the part number changes, I want this to update, I have access to those now. Simple addition, but again, it's going to be a useful one that we have within there. There's also a tool, if I'm in a sketch and I right click, there's an option called Select Broken Projections. So a lot of times, if you've ever been working within some components and you borrowed geometry from one, you projected things around, and then the first piece got deleted, all of a sudden you've got this orphan geometry, and there's broken pieces. There's just a tool that goes and finds, basically it selects them, and then we can just delete them and clean them up. So not a complete change of how we would do it. You definitely could do it before, but you would do it more manually. Now it's kind of built in there so that you can access that in a more automated way. So I like that one. This is one that stood out to me. This was clever, I think, and I think needed how we've been working through this. So one of the difficulties we've had for years is when we're dealing with a bill of material, if you've got suppressed components, getting that bill of material to reflect what you want it to reflect or not, and does it come in correctly? So an example would be if I have this series of components and then I suppress some of them, my numbers are suddenly all screwed up, and where does that come in, and how do we want to set this up? So now we've got a couple of settings where we can automatically number items sequentially, and we can work within the bill of material to hide suppressed components easily. Those suppressed components by default are going to have a 0 quantity visibility, right? So I'll point this out. This is something not that far. Let me go over here to my Inventor. There we go. So I'm going to leave this part alone. And I've got this little assembly here. I've got my motor, and I've got this belt running around. Well, if I take a look at this, I can say, well, you know what? That belt, that's not something, maybe we don't provide it, or maybe we don't want to just include it here. For any reason, I'm going to suppress that. And it does warn me. It says, suppressed components do not participate in the bill of materials. Well, good to know. So, of course, that's a prompt we can turn off, but I'm going to leave it on. So I'm going to suppress that piece that I have right there. And then I'm going to take a look at the bill of materials. And for that component that I have, it shows up as a 0 quantity component. So the suppressed component initially shows up as a 0 quantity component that I have as part of that. I have this new option here where I can go to Bill of Material Settings, and I can say I want to hide those suppressed components. And I'll go ahead and tell it to renumber. Nothing's really going to happen in this case because I already had them in a pretty good order. That was clear at the end. If it were up in the middle, then it would be more of a concern, but I'm going to turn that off. Now it no longer shows as a 0 component. I removed those suppressed components from my list. It's going to turn this back off and bring it back. If I unsuppress that, it gives me some warning about the suppression. It comes right back. But then now I see I've got quantity 1 that I have in there. I'm actually going to just move this around, and I'm just playing around here with some of the messing up some of my numbers that I have so that I can come back and say, let's go ahead and just renumber those items sequentially. So now we're just running in sequential order so we can have that through there. So the idea is we can have, if we suppress a component, it's a 0 quantity, but then we can remove them from the bill of materials so that we don't have to see them. And this has been, I don't know, not quite a struggle, but it's been an interesting thing to wrap your head around sometimes of when do things show up in the bill of materials, when do they not, how do we renumber them accordingly, and how do we pull this information in. So now we've got some tools that just allow us to access that a little easier. We also have seen some updates and changes with the 3D annotations where we can bring in, we can reference iProperty information about a particular component when we're using a leader. Didn't have this before within 3D annotation. We had it in 2D, but not in 3D. We can now reference the iProperty from any subassembly level associated with that particular object. So here in this example I have, it's in, hey, are we looking at the top one, the subassembly below that? You know, what level are we looking at when you're picking on that object? What custom property do we want to pull from that? So it gives us access to a little bit deeper level of information as it goes through there. So I like the idea of the bill of materials and how we can access that now, how we can update that and make those changes. This is another one that I really like. This has been something that I was looking at and I was like, yeah, that's the stuff. When last release, we had this new idea of model states. And one of the first things I did is cool, model state's got a model state, I'll create it. And then I wanted to go in and do an overlay. I thought, what if I have model state A and model state B? Can I lay them right on top of each other? Nope, it just wasn't there. Overlay view did not support that. Well, in this release, they have. They've now added that. It now supports it. And I'll point that out. And one of the reasons why I think that's useful and where that can come in. You can also edit detail views, which honestly, to me, I was like, we couldn't edit detail views. I guess I never paid attention to that. But now if I wanted to take a detail view and change it from a rectangle to a circle, or the type of edge that I want on there, we now have the ability to edit detail views and change the shape from circular to rectangular. That's, I never tried. I just thought, okay, cool, we can do that. But the overlay views, that I think is interesting. So let's take a look at that real quick. So what I'll do is I've got, let me go grab a component here. And with this component, this is using the model states that came out last year. And this, I think, is such a great way to use these. I've got this part that I have, and in this case, it's fully machined, but then I've got the different steps that it goes through. So it starts out as a casting, and then we machine off some surfaces and clean that up. Then we go through and we drill in the components, and then we would go through and do the final finishing touches, the fillets, chamfers, and other pieces that we would have on there. So it has specific steps that it goes through. And this is a really common thing where there's a difference between my cast dimensions and my machined dimensions, right? So super common that we would concern ourselves with where those are and how those fit together. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a quick new drawing And if I bring that in, I could, and this is true from the last release as well, I'm going to bring in the machined version of that. And I could determine, actually I'll bring in the cast version. We'll say we'll bring in the cast view of that. And this was true in the last release. I could bring in whichever model state I wanted. What has been added is the ability to now come along and do an overlay view right on top of that, where I can say, what view do I want? And I want the machined view overlaid on top of it. So now we can see the hidden lines, which is the depth that's been taken off by the machining operation, right? That's what's been removed by the machining operation. And I can even dimension between those. So I could call this out and point out, here, oh, let me edit that. Point out, here's, here it is as a cast part, here it is as a machined part, here's the difference. I can show those orders of operation overlaid on top of each other to begin to see that. So we always have been able to do those overlay views with positional representations, but now we can do it just with simple part representations where we've got those model states that are in there, and we can have that information go together. So I definitely, like I said, it's one of the first things I looked for last time when I was looking at those. I'm like, oh, can I overlay it on top? And nope, but now we can. Right. And, oh boy, I'm getting a time check. Yeah, it's just moving right along. So a couple other key components here. Let's get into talking a little bit about interoperability. One of the things with interoperability, and this started probably a couple of releases ago, and we had AnyCAD where we could bring in Revit data. We could then save that information out as a Revit family. We can save it out as a Revit project. So if you're doing anything that involves integrating with BIM, there's some great ways to do that. Up till now, though, what would have to happen is the Revit user would have to do a save as of the Revit information, save it in a different, basically remove some things, but send you the Revit file. It'd be a different version than what they were working on. Email it to you, Dropbox it to you, however they want to do that. And once you've got it, then you would import that. And you use AnyCAD to bring it in, and then you kind of have to maintain that link. If something gets changed, they would email you a new file and so on and so forth. We can do that a little differently now. Now there's a tool called data exchanges. And data exchanges, this gets deep quick, but data exchanges allow you with the Revit user to say, I'm going to send this information. So it's not saving as, it's selecting the information that they want to send. It then goes into what's called a data exchange package. And we can use Construction Cloud to be the facilitator between those for where that information is going to go. The nice thing about this is when it gets consumed by Inventor, if they make a change, if they want to update it, Inventor doesn't have to re-import that. Inventor, you don't have to overwrite your existing data. Autodesk Docs is the link between these. Revit can push the information to Autodesk Docs. Inventor can pull it right down from Autodesk Docs, and these can link together. So I've got this together. This, I think, makes a little more sense. We've got the source app, which is going to be Revit 2023. There's a connector, which is Autodesk Docs. It goes there, it sits there, and it gets pulled into the target app within Inventor. So this information can then, as it gets changed within Revit, we can update the connector, which then pulls that information right into Inventor. You don't have to be responsible for sending files back and forth and updating and sharing those. This is a lot to it, right? When you use it, if this were a tool you're using, I bet it would be great. If you've never touched it, it probably doesn't make any sense. Here's what I would say. If you have any interest in this, later this month, next month, we've got a couple of webinars specifically around this idea of interoperability between Revit and Inventor, and it's going to be leveraging a lot of this type of information. Because there's just a lot to it with being able to share this information. And this is probably the most commonly requested workflow that I'm working with today. I feel like I'm talking about this, years ago, I would talk about this once every 2 years. every week we're talking to someone about how do we share this information. So this has come along at a great time for Autodesk. This has come along at a great time for us because, and for us collectively, because this is really a tool we're seeing a lot of use in right now. So interoperability with Revit to Inventor, they've definitely improved that with the idea of these data exchanges. Again, we've got more info on that coming. Another place that they're talking about interoperability and the way that they're setting this up is to Fusion 360. So, there's always the question, do we use, when do we use Fusion 360? Should we use Fusion 360? If depending on the application, yeah, there's definitely things that it is so good at. It's got the manufacturing tools that are part of that. It's got the plastic injection molding tools that are part of it. Electronics, you can do PCB boards and things like that. There's all of these pieces that are specific to Fusion 360. Well, we could always export an Inventor model and push it to Fusion 360. There were always ways of doing that and setting that up. But now there's workflow options directly within Inventor. I can just click on one of them and push it directly to it. So creating toolpath strategies, looking at advanced simulations, running a generative design study. These are all one-click workflows now to push it to a specific area of Fusion 360. And I'll just point this out real quick. It's super simple to take a look at. I don't need you. I don't need that drawing. So we'll get back over here and I'll go to my CNC version and just save it. I have a Fusion 360 tab. All it does is it pushes things to my Fusion 360 project, to my cloud, and I'm going to do subtractive manufacturing. I want to begin running some tool paths and looking at some pieces. It says, okay, we're going to send it to Fusion 360 to prepare parts for milling or turning. Hey, sounds good to me. And what it does is it connects based off of my login here. I'm logged in as caleb.funk. It's looking at that to see what teams I'm a part of, pulling up the appropriate projects, and then I can push it up there to that. So it says, hey, these are all the projects you're a part of. Where do you want to drop it? And I say, yep, that sounds good. And then I can upload it directly from here. So I'm going to upload it to Fusion 360. If I go so far, I can say launch when it's complete, and it will launch in that environment, in the subtractive manufacturing environment, so that I can begin working on it right away. Similar to what I just talked about with Revit, we're seeing this type of workflow more and more, where people are leveraging not just Inventor and not just Fusion 360, but the combination of those. Or sometimes we're going all the way where we've got information coming from Revit that we need to build around that ends up being, we're going to our CAM tools that are available in Fusion 360. So being able to take data and have a digital thread run through all of those products is really key to being able to leverage these appropriately and work in the right place at the right time. Couple more things with interoperability. There's just a few more formats that we can export out to. So this isn't the links like we have with Fusion 360 and Revit. This is exporting files out into a different format. This was a new one to me, the GITF. So this is, it'll store the model data, also scene data and animation data. So you can save out to that format. It'll be a self-contained binary file. As by default, all this is supported by the task scheduler, but we can send this out. This is something I had a client literally ask yesterday about it. And I was thinking of 2022. I'm like, no, we don't have that option. And I was going back through my slide deck this morning. I'm like, oh my gosh, we do have that option. I totally forgot. So this is a new format. It's not one I was super familiar with. What I keep hearing more of is their goal is this is going to kind of be like the, this is going to be the JPEG, right, of 3D modeling. So I've heard that before though too. So we'll see. I'm very curious to see what directions that goes in. They've updated a few things with STEP. Performance for opening STEP files is improved. The default units is now millimeters. USBZ packages typically works with augmented reality. It's an ASCII file that it sends out. I'm not familiar with it, but we can work with that. And they've updated some things for JT. 10.6 and 10.7 support. So it makes sense to keep those going and to get that at that point. All right, so standouts to me with Inventor, I think that interoperability with both Fusion and Revit, that's definitely some standout areas in there. Love the fact that I can now put an iLogic tool directly on my toolbar, have it accessed, and work with that through there. So just some of those, that we're seeing Inventor is becoming a more mature tool. And so these are point improvements, I feel like, as we go through. But the interoperability to me is key. Switch gears here a little bit in our remaining 25 minutes. I want to take a look at what's new within Vault and kind of talk through some of the different areas that these things come in. Again, I'm always approaching it from what am I actually seeing useful? What are people actually using? What have clients been asking me for a while? And now we're seeing that really come about where we can use that. And it comes in a couple different areas. So one, there are some tools for authors that we can access, particularly with AutoCAD. They haven't done a whole lot with the AutoCAD tool for a while, but now they've updated that a little bit, made some changes, which is really useful. There is a fantastic tool. I'll spend some time talking about this with the administrator side of this. This is really great, and it's the idea of the Vault Gateway. And we'll see that in a moment. And then participants providing feedback. So there's markup tools that have changed a little bit. So got a few things to show off here. This data management is something I spend a lot of time with, work with a lot of customers on. It's always important to have that data corralled, have the single source of truth, and then be able to access it easily. So one thing they've changed is the AutoCAD add-in. There's just a couple of things with the way that you can access it now. You can go to a specific Vault folder. You can copy design right from AutoCAD. You can show details from the AutoCAD designs right within the view. Basically, they've taken it and updated it a little bit so that the AutoCAD add-in acts kind of more like it does with an Inventor than what it used to do. It almost was like a, it was more like that external reference doc. They've updated and we have more access to information with it, so we can have additional information as part of it. So that was a nice addition to that. I'll point this out here in a minute because I'm going to pull up my Vault, but they have updated the user interface. I'm using the dark interface now. The icons have been updated. The feel overall looks just a little more modern, I guess, than what we've seen in the past. And I kind of like it. It looks very sleek, and it's a very much in line with what I'm seeing with other tools. So you can switch between dark, light, and the old classic, the theme that was part of that. I like it. I'm kind of used to it from some other tools from Autodesk now too, so I'm sticking with it. And yeah, the icons look great. One thing that they've added is the ability to do your column customization. And we could do this before in a standard Vault view, in any view that we were in, but now they're updating it so that we can do this in all of these different dialog boxes: change state, revision, category, pack and go, the property, undo a checkout. You couldn't customize the view. It was very basic, I guess I'll say, in there. It was kind of a default view, and that's what you had. Now you can go in and customize it. It is per user. It's always good stuff. Here we go. This is interesting. Though they have changed, they being Autodesk have changed the viewer that's in Vault. So now the viewer it used to be the design review. That was our default viewer. You had to have design review installed or you couldn't view the files. For 2023, that has been changed. It's now the Forge viewer is part of the Vault Thick client. It's been part of the Thin client, at least last release. Yeah, it was last release was part of the Thin client. Now it's part of the Thick client. And they've added markups into here. So we've had this concept of markups in Vault for a good long while. It was really part of DWF. This is now, we can have markups that we can view in Vault, and they can be saved to Vault. It's not even saved as a separate file. It's just data that's saved within Vault, within the Forge viewer that we can access and take a look at. These can be edited or deleted via the markup browser. And I'll just kind of walk through one of these and point out some of this and how this works. But this is a really, I like this. This was one of the things that stood out to me immediately about the new version of Vault. I'm like, oh yeah, I can see some use for that. So I'm going to grab my Vault and just point out a couple of things. One, you can see right away, this is my interface that I have, and it's just one of the options is what interface am I using? Am I using dark mode, light mode, classic mode, right? Oh, see, now at this point that looks so bright to me, I can barely handle it. So we can adjust that, and that's what we're talking about. The icons look a little different. Everything looks a little updated that I have as part of that. But this is what stands out to me. I'm going to go here and I'm going to view this file, and it uses the Forge viewer here in the background. So let me make this a little bit bigger. So it's not using the designer view like it did in the past. It's using the Autodesk large file viewer in here as part of that. And so all my things, zoom, pan, adjust, move around, all these different pieces are part of that. I'll come in here and take a look, and I'm going to go into my markup. Now, you know what? I'm just going to delete these. And the reason I'm deleting them is this is one I played with earlier today. I was getting ready, getting some things around, running through my last checks. So here's my markup browser that's in here as part of this. And I'm going to put in a cloud. We'll just circle that actually. And then I'll put a call out on that and put this in check. I'm going to get this per specs or something. I just want to put something in there so I've got something as part of that. Once I've got this information in here, I can save this, and I have two options. I could do just a screenshot, which saves it as a PNG file to my desktop, right? I don't want to do that. I want to save this as data. And I'm just going to say check dimension. The name does not really matter. What happens is that now says on April 27, 2022, this markup was created by administrator and got added over here to this. It's now in my markup browser. Multiple people could mark up this particular file, and those markups, let's get rid of that, those are stored with this file. Now it's a little different than what we've seen in the past. I don't see that here. If I just go to that file, I don't see it, but if I go to markup, I can go back and pull up any markups that are in here. To edit these, it's about the simplest thing. All I have to do is just start drawing again. So I'll draw a cloud around this area. That's now been added to the markup. And I can just save it as data. That gets saved to the markup that I was actively looking at. I can rename them, and I can delete them if I want to. So this markup engine is much easier to work with than what we might have seen in the past. It's very responsive, and it's pretty robust. I mean, we've got freehand, text, callouts, clouds, rectangles, arrows. You can change your line style and thickness, and you can change your fill style if we're going to fill something in. So I can come along and fill, oh, not with that, I can't, and fill in a cloud, fill in an area with something like that. Right? I could have an opaque cloud covering an area. I don't want either one of those markups, so I'm just going to delete them out of there. So yeah, this is a great new addition to what I have within here. So I'm going to save that as data. Awesome. So I've got my markups. It's been saved. Once I'm done with my markups, it goes away. I really like this ability to do that, and I think it's really useful. Now, everything I'm doing is through the thick client right here. I'm going to pull up the Autodesk thin client. Actually, jump off of that. I got to log back in. So the thin client that I have, just take a look at the same files. It also uses that same Forge viewer. So that's the same viewer that I had just a moment ago when I was looking over there within Vault. It's exactly the same viewer. It's the same type of thing. And if I go to my markups, I have the same markup panel. I can pull up the previous markups that someone else has. I can create new markups. So I could come in and create one here within the thin client. Here's the thing. If I'm in the thin client, currently I can only save that as a snapshot. I can only save it as a screenshot. I can't save the data back like I can in the thick client, right? So just a word of caution, that's one of the first things I look for, right? I'm like, oh man, could I do that same thing over here in the thin client? No, I can mark it up, but I can only save it as a PNG. With a full license through the thick client, we can edit it. We can have those extended markups in there. I love it. I really like the markup tool that's been added to this as part of it. So yeah, markups and viewing. The next couple of things that I have are administrative. So one's a simpler one, and one couple simple ones, and then one gets complex. So one of the simple ones is design file restriction. There's an option if you're an administrator in Vault. So we're talking administrator level stuff. If you're an administrator, you can say you cannot put a DWG into Vault unless it goes through AutoCAD. Or you can't put in an Inventor file unless it goes through AutoCAD. And typically that's what we want to do. We can work with that list. What we have now is we can say you can't put Inventor files in, but you can put DWGs. You can define which file extensions are allowed to be checked in outside of the design tool and which ones are not. It's a pretty fine point. You know, it's one of those I'm like, yeah, I can see where that'd be useful, but it's not something everyone's been asking me for or worried about. So it's just interesting. Another administrative tool that's kind of just interesting is this idea of life cycle state colors, where we can set up colors that determine the life cycle state. It's kind of like what you see for categories. This is set up an administrator level and it shows up for all users. And you do have to have the glyph column, the state glyph column turned on for this to be seen. So let me show you. I actually had it in my Vault here just a second ago. You might not have noticed, you might have right there. This is what it's talking about. It's if I take a look at files that are released, let me just make this bigger. Go in here, I've got a whole bunch of work in progress. My work in progress is green, my released are blue. It's just one more visual clue. It changes nothing about how those tools work. It changes nothing about how what it looks like. What I was talking about with that glyph column is there is a field here called state glyph. If that is not in there, it just looks like it always did. We do not see that additional information appear with that. I'll just bring it back over here. And I gotta go get it and move it up so that it shows up in my list. Those colors, by the way, were automatic. I did not define anything with the colors. I updated my old Vault to this new version, and by default, I don't want to go to administration, I want to go to Vault settings. By default, it added glyph colors to every one of those. This is kind of the out of the box, what this looks like when it goes through. I could come in and change their color if I wanted, you know, release to be red or whatever else I wanted to have it set up for. But I've got some options on those. It does give you default colors. I thought when I first set it up that I would have to go through and set up all the colors myself and establish all of that. But nope, it's right there. So you just select from it. So that's just, get rid of that. So that's just kind of a quick idea, you know, that we can go and turn those on. I like it. It definitely adds a little bit of, you know, that it's definitely a good visual clue as to what's going on. I can very clearly see, you know, how that appears and what that looks like. Yeah, I'm good with that, right? So that works for me. Why am I here? I was thinking I had one other thing. Oh, when you go to view an Inventor file, you have the option to use Inventor read-only mode. You can say always use Inventor read-only mode. It's a new default setting that they have within there. And there's the idea of, something I forget what another piece is. But so we have the idea of you can adjust that. So yeah, that's right. My theme is here. I can do my, when we're viewing files, do want to use Design Review or the Autodesk Viewer. I love the Autodesk Viewer. We don't have to install Design Review. We don't have to worry about that. It's using the Autodesk Viewer platform to go in and take a look at that. So that is my preference. All right, so those were okay. I like, there's some adjustments. It's nice that they have that. The next one is a very significant tool, and it's definitely changing the way that we're working with this a little bit. And that's the idea of a Vault gateway. So the Vault gateway, it exists so that we, for people who are working remotely. So 2 years ago, almost exactly, right? It was April 2 years ago, when the pandemic started here in the United States and everything's going through and everything's shutting down. There was a moment when we were like, well, gosh, this is going to be interesting to see what our business looks like. We're working with these manufacturers. And suddenly we realized we were incredibly busy. And part of the reason we were so busy is everyone's question was, how do we work from home? What do we need to do to access Vault? Please help us set these things up. And this, I really wish this tool had been out at the time. This is such a great tool to work with. Here's the idea. If you asked me 2 years ago, you asked me 6 months ago, how do I access Vault if I'm sitting at my home office and not inside the company firewall? I'm not logged into our network. I'm just at home. I would have said you have to have a VPN, virtual private network, so it seems like you're on your company network, and that's how you get into Vault. You have to be behind the firewall. That's the rule. Vault Gateway removes that idea. It uses Autodesk Forge as the Autodesk Forge platform as a point to access this information. So how this works is if you're sitting at home and you want to log into Vault, instead of logging into server, Vault 01, where you typically log into, you log into a web address that is the Vault Gateway. And Forge, through the Autodesk Forge platform, it's going to go through and give you Vault access as if you were sitting there and working on it right at your desk. You'll have access to that. So this opens up a lot of options. This is a new component. We actually have already done this with a few clients where they have been working on it, but the concept itself is new. I've got just a few minutes left, but I do want to talk about this a little bit. This has to be configured by the administrator, and it really works. It's not something you can say, here's my gateway. Some of this is given to us. And let me give you an example. I got to make sure I get the right thing here. There we go. I'll bring up my data management server console. And I'll bring this up. And this is my, right, so at this point, I am logging into it here. At this point, this is very Vault admin, right? This is, you'll typically never see this. This is all Vault admin type of thing. But I do want to point out that there is a new option called Manage Vault Gateway. And what the Vault Gateway does is I'll go configure it. I have to be logged in. I'm going to give it all of my Vault information, my service account information, which is my Autodesk information, right? So I'm logging in as me. Now, I will say, as I set this up, I'm doing this for demonstration purposes. Your mileage may vary. There's some things to consider. There's a lot more to this. And with any of these things that we go through, if you have additional questions, if you have additional, man, that'd be great, but how do we, please reach out to us. Let us know. We would love to discuss some of this with you. I've got a couple regions I can use. I can use a European region or a US region. I'm going to use my US region. And what happens is it connects to that service, and it will go through and generate a gateway for me. Let's see how long it takes this time. I've done this a couple times, and sometimes it takes a bit, sometimes it goes pretty quickly. It's going to give me a host name that's in here and part of this. And then that host name is what I can log into to generate when I do my logins. So you notice it gave me a host name of B689, I'm just going to copy that. That is my gateway information. That's what I use when I log into my Vault. So now, if I jump back here over to Vault, now of course I'm literally sitting on my computer. You know, like this is where it's at. But instead of saying here's the server I want, that's my server information. So it can use that to log into my Vault through the Vault gateway. Oh, look at that. My password doesn't satisfy minimum requirements. So there are some rules about that. And this is one of the things where I said your mileage may vary. My password is blank. I don't have a password. I never set one up for this. So I have to, my normal admin password just for myself is blank. So it's going to stop me from doing that. But that's what stopped me. It sees that server. It sees the vaults that are on there. I do not have to set up a VPN. I can log into it directly from here to pull that information. So this is an incredibly powerful tool. And again, if this is something you're looking to set up, we'd love to talk to you about it. There's some considerations to take into place and some ways that we can work with it. But overall, what an addition. It's something that stands out to me as probably, you know, the MVP of this release is the ability to do that. All right, Lori, we were dead on right up to it. So I just want to say thank you. I know there's, you know, there's a lot of ways to consume information, a lot of ways to look at things. I've been doing this for 20 years and I always enjoy doing it. I love talking about the new pieces within the software, trying to figure out ways that people can access it, use it, and actually put it into practice. So thanks so much.